circuits in the brain responsible for how you're going to process an emotion, how you're going to process a trigger, how you're going to process what is happening around you in the environment. Now, when the puberty hits and the pubertal hormones aa jate hain, they go and act on these receptors. So there's a huge number of young girls coming with issues with how they feel that their body is not perfect. Now, with the body image issues also then translates into eating issues. Because then they develop eating disorders. I tell the children that your fight and flight response should be active when you're in danger, danger to life. But in the adolescent age group, it's constantly active. Even in the reproductive age group can also go through something that we call as premenstrual symptoms or premenstrual dysphoria, which is a lot of times people think, oh, this is normal. All of us say, oh, before my periods, 1 or 2 days before, I'm very irritable. Right? When you get married, a lot of then pressure to conceive, I think, from everybody around. And we always advise that before a lady wants to kind of, get pregnant, she must do a screening for herself about her mental health. Preconception mental health screening is very important. If you're anxious during your pregnancy, it's going to impact your baby's brain growth, the development of the baby's brain. Of increase in OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder in young mothers. They're constantly cleaning. They're constantly cleaning everything around. In women, there are 2 times when you can have any kind of psychiatric disorder. One is during the adolescent phase between 15 to 17, when the hormonal changes happen, and the other is usually 30 to 35. We call it the bimodal age group. A woman who starts to drink can spiral into a disorder very, very quickly and much earlier than a man who starts at the same age, because of the way our brain's made. Again, when let's look at what's happening to the hormones, right? So your hormones are declining. Your estrogen is getting lesser and lesser. Like I told you, estrogen is a neuroprotective chemical. So it almost works like a natural antidepressant. Now, when you're in the perimenopause period, it's declining. When you're in menopause, estrogen band ho gaya. So then there is no neuroprotection naturally that's happening. And I walk every day for half an hour. No, that's not enough. In the perimenopause age group, you have to include some kind of resistance training and strength training. We are starting puberty quite early. So you're going to reach menopause also early. Old age, women and widow. They are the ones who are the most vulnerable population for mental health issues. How we say ki beti padhao and desh badhao. In the same way, a women's mental health will change the health of the entire family.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Happier Hour. Today we have with us Dr. Cheryl Joan. She is an eminent psychiatrist born and raised in Mumbai. She is a celebrated speaker on mental health at both national and international conferences, and she consults at Holy Spirit Hospital and Hiranandani Hospital, Mumbai. She specializes in treating young adults, women and families. She completed her MD in psychiatry from Lokmanya Tilak Municipal Medical College and Hospital, Mumbai, and completed the training in Kharkov method of counseling from St. Xavier's College, and did an online training module in DBT under Marsha Linehan from USA. She is the co-chairperson of NDPS Task Force of the Indian Psychiatric Society and is member of Awards Committee of Bombay Psychiatric Society. A passionate advocate of community mental health, she wants to promote mental health awareness and contribute towards destigmatizing mental illness and conducts various talks across the length and breadth of the country. Welcome to the show, Doctor.
My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so today we are going to talk about women's mental health. And, Doctor, with you, we'll talk about various, stages in a woman's life and how the mental health goes with it. So, we'll start with adolescence and young adulthood. So, in your experience and your opinion, how does a girl's mental health goes when she is a little child and, goes into puberty and, young adulthood?
So we do definitely see a lot of change, right? Not just women, all children in general, when they move from being young children to adolescence, because of the hormonal changes, we will see a change in their mental health. But girls are more predisposed. So there is a lot of data which says that because of the pubertal hormones, a lot of emotional, along with the physical changes in the body, a lot of emotional and mental health changes happen. And this because the pubertal hormones that we talk about, estrogen, progesterone, they act on the brain cells. तो क्या होता है कि एक तो body change हो रही है, right? And if they are not comfortable with their body, the body is changing, nobody is talking to them about these changes. उसके साथ peer group change हो रहा है, so a lot of changes in the peer group. All the children are, going through the same emotional changes because of the hormones. So that peer group interaction which becomes a problematic, and we do see a huge rise in between 12 to 17-year-old girls with depression, with anxiety, with a lot of mood changes, suicide, self-harm. So we see a rise in that age group.
And why is that happening? Is it primarily because of, this surge in the hormones and the change in hormones that is happening in their body?
So multiple factors to it, right? First, primarily is of course the hormones. So the hormones act on the brain cells. Now, our brain is responsible. I think that should be our, understanding of mental health. If that's a basic understanding, then everything else falls into place. So brain is the one that's responsible for mood, for thinking, and for behavior. Not an individual. It's not something that we are doing on our own. So there are circuits in the brain responsible for how you're going to process an emotion, how you're going to process a trigger, how you're going to process what is happening around you in the environment. Now, when the puberty hits and the pubertal hormones aa jate hain, they go and act on these receptors. So the emotion, in adolescent period, the emotional part of the brain is fully developed. And the logical part of the brain, we call it the prefrontal cortex, is not as developed. That develops only by the time you're 20, 25. So their emotional sensor is very, very developed. So they are very impulsive, they are very aggressive. I always say, right, from babies who are very cute and nice, suddenly when they become teenagers, they become difficult to manage. And that's because the brain's like that. Now, that's what's happening in the brain, but every child doesn't have a problem or doesn't manifest with a disorder. It's because a lot of changes in the society, a lot of changes, like I said, in their peer group, a lot of pressure at home, whether it's with academics, whether it's parental conflicts, all these things will trigger in somebody who is vulnerable to manifest diseases. तो अगर हमारी वातावरण में problem है और I am susceptible to a problem, then it will manifest more,
Okay. And in terms of, body image and, how they perceive their bodies when they're growing up, how does it happen and how does it impact, their mental health?
So with young teenage girls, like I said, with the hormonal changes, their body is changing. So earlier, maybe a few years back, they were comparing themselves to each other.
Correct.
Right? But now with social media and exposure to such a huge pool of comparison, their comparisons are not just with their classmates. Their comparison is with film stars. They are comparing with other teenagers all across the world. The glass skin from Korea and the perfect, body from somebody in another part of the world. So their reference point is changing. Now, when I'm comparing to somebody who's better than me, it causes a lot of self-esteem issues. So they are always doubting themselves, uncomfortable with their body. I mean, I will give you an example. I like to say these stories. There was this young girl who had come to me and she was saying, I'm collecting money, pocket money, whatever you get for Raksha Bandhan, Diwali and everything. I have to have a budget of 4 to 5 lakhs. And I'm like, why are you collecting that money? She said, no, in Korea, because she did all her research that in Korea you can do surgeries, anybody can go and get surgery, because she was not comfortable with how her nose was looking. So the nose is not perfectly aligned. She was saying, doctor, can you just see my nose is not perfect. It's a little crooked. And she had a beautiful nose. But because she's looking at AI, and AI is telling her, that, okay, this is a more perfect version of yourself. Now I think recently all of us are on Insta with the Gemini app, changing us and making us look, with filters. So when they're comparing themselves, they're not comfortable with the body. So we are seeing a lot of body image issues. We are seeing what we call as body dysmorphic disorders a lot, which used to be a very rare entity earlier. Over the last 20 years of my practice, in the last, let's say, 5-6 years, huge number of young girls coming with issues with how they feel that their body is not perfect. Now, with the body image issues also then translates into eating issues. Because then they develop eating disorders because either they are starving themselves or they're eating with the family, and then they're going and either taking out the food by vomiting, or they're going and using laxatives so that the food doesn't get absorbed. So we see a lot of anorexia, bulimia, eating issues, because again it is to fit with the body that they feel is perfect.
And in terms of, parents, how can they recognize these issues in their kid? Because I'm sure, the kids do not talk about it with the parents as well. And it's only at the later stage, when the situation is really bad, that's when parents know about it. But how can parents be more involved and they can know about these issues?
So I think we should, and as psychiatrists, we like to believe that first let's try to prevent the problem before it arises. So right from a very young age, even before kids reach puberty, talking to them about, what is normal about body image, how to be comfortable in your own skin, building your child's confidence, self-esteem is very important. Because I think when you're younger, the only information that you're getting about yourself is from your parents. Your classmate is not telling you much about how you're looking. Vis-a-vis when they become teenagers, they're getting a lot of, they're influenced more by their peers. So पहले ही हमें वो जो foundation है self-esteem का, confidence का, वो तो ले करना ही है. Talking to the children about puberty has to happen at home. Parents have to have the conversations about the body changes, about the hormone changes. Parents have to be alert to any change in behavior in the children, because we tend to miss that. So if you're observing that your child is becoming a little bit more irritable than usual, is isolating, is wanting to stay in the room more often. Some of it, of course, normal teenagers want to be a little alone, but if it's become problematic, they don't want to interact with you, they don't want to have a meal with you. They are always locked up in their, room. There's a lot of screen use that is problematic. Any dip in academic performance, you're seeing any change in their friend group. They had this, you have a particular group that goes on, you're in a friend circle from the time that you're in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and suddenly there is a change. The friend group has changed. They've got another completely new set of friends, and you don't know who those friends are. Snapping very easily, or the children crying very often. Especially for girls, you have to look out for self-harm also. So a lot of times we are seeing young girls, almost 1 in 10 or 1 in 7 children are cutting themselves. Earlier they would cut on their wrist, so it was very obvious. But now the kids are very, very smart. They're smarter than us. They're cutting on their thighs, they're cutting on their shoulders. So family is not even aware that they are cutting. So being alert to these changes. And the moment you see these changes, taking them for help. Talking to them. Sometimes there are few things that you can fix and you can control, but even taking them to a mental health professional if you're seeing that change is very important.
And when we talk about this, you talk about cutting. So, why are kids cutting themselves? Why? Because for a normal human being, it's like it hurts, right, when you cut yourself. But why would they do that?
So, this age group, like I told you, in adolescence, there's a lot of emotional dysregulation. कि हमारे emotions is like a roller coaster ride, right? एक ही दिन में वो बहुत खुश रहते हैं और एक ही दिन में बहुत ज़्यादा छोटी सी भी trigger हो गई and they are dipping. So they are on a roller coaster of emotions. वो emotional dysregulation को handle नहीं कर पाते, या they feel very numb, and this is what most of the kids who cut tell us कि feeling so numb कि मुझे अपने emotions समझ में ही नहीं आ रहे. But when I cut, I can understand pain. So they convert their emotional distress into physical distress. So we should not get angry with them because they are cutting, because that's why they're hiding, right? Because we are getting everybody's getting angry with you, why you're doing this. It's a cry for help. because they don't know how to regulate their emotions. And if you're able to help them with that, then the cutting will stop.
And how can we help them to regulate their emotions?
A lot of things, right? One is understand why they are getting emotional. So understand this is a part of their brain. So in that group, they always, the fight and flight response is very, very active. So even a small trigger, and I tell the children, your fight and flight response should be active when you're in danger, danger to life. But in the adolescent age group, it's constantly active. So everything acts like danger to life. It could be an exam, it could be a friend not inviting you for a birthday party, it could be a friend not liking your post, it could be the crush that you're having is talking to somebody else. Your fight and flight response is active. So you're anxious. So your body has physical changes, right? Their heart is racing, they're feeling difficulty breathing, tremors, eating issues, sleep issues. So one is, how do you teach them? One is setting a routine. So having a routine is extremely important. In that routine, one of the most important things is sleep. And I think any mental health professional, if no matter how much you Google, how much you read, everybody talks about sleep. And why sleep is important is that's the time when the brain is regulating the entire machinery. It is kind of doing all the repair work. It's like, a production factory having one day off for maintenance. So maintenance work happens in the night when you're sleeping. So the brain is kind of regulating all the parts that are needed for emotion. So they have to sleep on time. Kids say we are sleeping, but we are sleeping at 3 o'clock and getting up at 9 o'clock. That's not the right, because it doesn't fall in place with your circadian rhythm. Your circadian rhythm is that you have to be in bed at least by 11:30. Also, you understand that teenagers, the circadian rhythm does shift. So they do the melatonin secretion वो सब थोड़ा late release होता है, तो उनका shift होता ही है 12 बजे तक उनको नींद आनी चाहिए. And they have to sleep at that time and wake up. Encourage them to get involved in some kind of sports activity. Not maybe for competitive sports, but when they're playing that sport, it activates, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calming nervous system. Teaching children to pause. So when you're doing any kind of sport, when you're doing any kind of mindfulness activity, when you're doing meditation, pranayam, you are more in touch with the cues of your body. Right? Why are they reacting that way? Because they're so impulsive. But if you kind of think about the time when you're impulsive and you think about it, you will realize that body mein thode changes to hue the before I reacted. So if the children are taught to be aware of those changes, then they learn how to pause, regulate. So sleep, exercise. The other thing is journaling really helps. So you ask them to maintain a journal. Another challenge is that when kids maintain journal, parents want to know what's going in the journal. I think that we should kind of respect their privacy so that they're able to journal and take out, declutter their thoughts a lot. Having open communication, always having that, a home should be a safe space where they come and tell you without, as parents, you reacting to what they are saying. Sometimes kids don't want advice. They just want somebody to talk to. So if you create that space, if you set a routine for them, give them opportunities where they are successful at things. It could be small things, right? It could be even cooking pasta at home and then appreciating them for that. So they feel, that, oh wow, I did something great. All these things help in regulating emotions.
And we touched upon it, but how does social media play a role in, young women's mental health?
So social media is great if it is used judiciously and for the right reasons. So let's look at the positives actually first, right? So with social media, there's a lot of connectivity. So maybe you are a young girl who likes ghazals and your entire class likes K-pop. You can't connect with them, but there would be somebody on social media group where you can connect and you can enjoy, sharing your passion about it. A lot of apps are helpful for them in their learning process. The problem with social media is what is the extent of the use that they are doing. So we have to be aware about, what is the content that they are consuming. So what is the content of that what they are consuming, the time that they are using to consume. It's very important. And which kind of circles that they are getting into. Now the challenges with that is if it's unsupervised, they're getting into interactions with a lot of people who may not be healthy for them. We tell young children, right, don't talk to strangers.
Correct.
We tell them that, oh, you don't talk to an uncle that you don't know, don't talk to an auntie that you know, but we don't tell them about that when they're in social media. So they are friending people who may be actual sexual predators. And thanks to filters, you have 45-year-olds who are posing as 16 and 17-year-olds and having interactions with young girls. And they form such a connect because they know what to talk to these 16-year-olds, right? Another 16-year-old boy will be very awkward, but a 45-year-old knows what a 16-year-old girl wants to hear. So be aware of that kind of, the sexual predators, the child trafficking things that happen. Pornography, that's a very, very big problematic thing of social media. The challenge with pornography is because you're exposed to a lot of disillusioned content. This is how a sexual life should be, because and it's because it's unfiltered, right? It could be anybody. It could be a 10-year-old who's actually typing to look for bread, but he puts BRE, and you could have images of breasts coming up. And then out of curiosity, the child is Googling it or clicking it and getting that information. So those are the challenges. Bullying, a lot of cyber bullying that happens. Because I wear a dress, my friend tells me I don't like it, my mother will say it's not looking nice. That's it. But I wear a dress and post it on social media, on my Insta account. There'll be thousands of people who have an opinion about how I look. And I'm constantly going and seeing who's liked it, who has put the negative comment. And that's going to impact the young girl's mind about how she sees herself, how she perceives her self-image, that interaction with so many people. So social media has got the pros and cons that we use very judiciously.
Interesting. And now we'll talk about the second stage. It's the reproductive stage, wherein from 20s till 40s, a woman is going through maternity. And first, I would say, the stage wherein you get married and then you have maternity, and then later on postpartum. So how does a woman's body and mental health goes through all these phases?
So once the pubertal stage is done, you're kind of now got comfortable with your hormones, you're comfortable with your cycles and everything. But when you reach, let's say, like you said correctly, right, the education is over, you're in that reproductive age group, a lot of cues from your environment change, because then everybody wants you to get married, settle down, have children. Those things also play a role on a woman's mind if she's not ready for it. She has to give in to time is clicking, your biological clock is ticking kind of thing. So that causes a lot of stress. Now, women in the reproductive age group can also go through something that we call as premenstrual symptoms or premenstrual dysphoria, which is a lot of times people think, oh, this is normal. All of us say, oh, before my periods, 1 or 2 days before, I'm very irritable. Right? But some of them can be leading to a disorder that we call as premenstrual dysphoric disorder, where there are not only physical changes, of course, the bloating, the tenderness and everything, but a lot of emotional changes. Irritability, crying, anger outbursts, unable to sleep, brain fog. And it impacts almost 15 days of their month. Because it starts from the time that they're ovulating till the time they get their period. So out of a month of 30 days, 15 days, you're not functioning very well. So before even you think about marriage and pregnancy, you have to be alert about these things and see if you're going through those changes. And of course, the moment you get married, a lot of then pressure to conceive, I think, from everybody around. And we always advise that before a lady wants to kind of, get pregnant, she must do a screening for herself about her mental health. Preconception mental health screening is very important, because how you are as a woman and, your mental health is going to impact whether you can conceive or not. Why do we see a rise in infertility now? Because if you're in a stressful environment, if you are undergoing any kind of mental health trigger, your reproductive health is going to get impacted. And that's going to delay your chances of getting pregnant, of having healthy outcomes of pregnancy. So once you're married and you're planning, if you are willing to have a child, you must have some kind, how you go to a gynecologist and get everything checked, you get your folic acid, you get all your hormonal levels done. I think it should be mandatory to also get a mental health check to know before pregnancy how you have been. Then we talk about the perinatal, like you said, the perinatal and the postpartum, lot of again hormonal interplay, because the estrogen, progesterone, everything is now secreted to take care of the baby in your womb, right? So women go through a lot of mood fluctuations, a lot of anxiety during that perinatal period, because they're worried about, is my baby okay? Is my baby healthy? To how will my life be once this baby comes out? Will I be able to manage? Will I be able to manage work and the baby? Will I have to sacrifice who I am for the baby that's coming? Will I be able to, manage all my responsibilities equally well? So that anxiety is there, anxiety about health, anxiety again about body image. Will I go back to being how I was, physically? The challenge with that, and now we see that when we see adolescents, like you said, I was telling you, depression and anxiety in 14, 15-year-olds, and when we ask them about history, we always ask them about their mother's maternal history. We ask the mother, and we see the mother would also probably have been stressed and anxious. So when you are stressed and anxious during your pregnancy, it's going to impact your baby's brain growth, the development of the baby's brain. And there's so much of data and research उसके बारे में. So you are stressed, आपके पूरे stress hormones release हो रहे हैं, वो आपकी baby के growth को impact कर रहे हैं. And the baby will manifest with mental health disorders when he becomes an adolescent or she becomes an adolescent. So your mental health during that time is very, very important. Postpartum, once a baby is out, all of us have a little bit of what we call as postpartum blues, a little irritability, getting used to that sleep cycle, crying. But sometimes it can move into postpartum depression, where you're extremely sad, no interest, you can't connect emotionally with the baby, you don't want to take care of the baby. Mothers find it difficult when the babies are latching on, so difficulty in breastfeeding, difficulty in interaction and connecting with the world. Suicidal thoughts. A lot of mothers, young mothers, get suicidal thoughts. Sometimes you can also have health anxiety. We see a lot of increase in OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder in young mothers. They're constantly cleaning. They're constantly cleaning everything around. They don't allow anybody else to touch the baby's bottle. The baby's bottle has to be washed 10 times. They wash in this particular way. Nobody can touch anything. So they can't even delegate the work because they're so anxious. And then they're already tired, sleep deprived. They can't delegate because of the anxiety. A little bit more serious issue that we see is what we call as postpartum psychosis, where the mother sometimes loses touch with reality. She can't connect all with the baby, and that can be quite serious and harm herself or harm the baby. So we have to be aware about these changes.
And you spoke about the mental health checks that needs to be done basically before a woman decides to conceive. So what all should be there in such a checklist? So does it exist today? And what all should be part of it?
Unfortunately, no. There is nothing that we call as exist. And I always, when I go for my talks, I always say this. We get training for everything in life, right? For whatever profession that we do, we get training. Even if you are a homemaker, your mother teaches you how to cook the dal, how to clean the home. But marriage and parenting, nobody teaches you. So you're just pushed into that thing. So when we're talking about the pre-motherhood, check is understand how are you coping with stress in your life? What are your coping mechanisms? Are they healthy coping mechanisms? Because all of us undergo stress. And some of us are able to manage it better if you know the right coping mechanisms. So if you have stress, all of us have stress. Are you coping? So as a young woman who wants to become a mother, we kind of do a check of understanding, are you able, how resilient are you? Are you coping with stress well? Are you sleeping well? How are you managing your emotions? Do you have depression, anxiety? Do you have other mental health disorders which are undiagnosed? Do you have substance use which can impact your fertility? So like a screening for that is important. We don't have that in place, but I hope that, more women, when they want to do, and it is changing. Like I have a lot of young women who say that, okay, we've gone to the gynecologist, we've got all our hormonal assays, our vitamins done. We also want to know from you, do you think we are mentally prepared? But it's just the beginning. It's very much in the nascent stage. So the more people are aware about that, because then if you are already prepared of how to handle your stress, when the situation comes, you are equipped to deal with it. You're not pushed into the deep end of the swimming pool.
True. And during these phases, I mean reproductive phases, what are the kind of mental health disorders that might appear in a woman which were never appearing before, which there was no history of, and suddenly they appear?
Correct. So in women, in women, there are two times when you can have any kind of psychiatric disorder. One is during the adolescent phase between 15 to 17, when the hormonal changes happen. And the other is usually 30 to 35. We call it the bimodal age group because of the changes. So depression and anxiety, definitely, that's one of the most common things. We can also see psychosis, or what we call as schizophrenia. We can see bipolar mood disorder. We see obsessive compulsive disorder. We see substance use disorders. And women as substance use disorders is very different from men. So, for men, social drinking, and for women, social drinking can lead to a disorder very quickly because of the way our brain is wired. So you would say that, okay, we've all started together to have a drink, and we call it telescoping. I mean, a woman who starts to drink can spiral into a disorder very, very quickly and much earlier than a man who starts at the same age because of the way our brain's made. So substance use disorders are very, very common in the reproductive age group. We have to look for depression and anxiety. That's one of the most common. So the incidence is as common as 1 in 5 women will experience depression and anxiety in their lifetime.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a big number.
And how many are actually, and out of that, probably 1 in 100 will come to take help.
Correct. And, typically, I mean, in this age group, how does the mental health that was there in adolescence impact the mental health now in the reproductive age group?
Definitely, right? Because like I told you, right, if you want to learn swimming, I don't just push you into the swimming pool, right? You will learn to swim. You will put in your folders, you will put in those, that floater to swim. In the same way, when you're adolescent, when your brain is developing, if you have learning those skills, or you're taught the skills, you don't learn them on your own. You're taught skills about how to manage stress, how to be resilient, how to take care of yourself first, right? When you're learning all those self-care priorities, when you're in the reproductive age group, when stress happens, which is when the maximum stress happens for a woman. As a young girl, it's probably only her academics or what she wants to do in career, maybe some stress at home. But in the reproductive age group, a lot of players in the game, right? Her family, if she's getting married, that family, the children, work. So if you already know those skills, if you learn to swim, then you can swim in the sea, you can swim in the pool, you can do scuba diving. So if you learn those skills at a very young age, then you're able to maneuver it much better. Doesn't mean that you will not develop a mental health disorder. नहीं, हो सकता है, right? Because that's how it is. ऐसा नहीं है कि मैंने सीख लिया तो I will not have a fall. But you're better equipped.
Makes sense. And, from the perspective of adolescents, so what are schools doing, schools and other setups that we have around doing to make sure that the mental health of women or girls in that age is much better, so that we do not have this ripple effect throughout their lives?
A lot of changes. I mean, over the last few years, we really have schools invested in mental health of children. So a lot of schools run programs where very young age, from grade 1 onwards, they start talking about emotions. Otherwise, nobody talked about emotions. See, in school, when you were in community science period, you would talk about how you need to brush your teeth, take a bath, wear clean clothes, keep your environment clean. We don't talk about emotional hygiene. We never talked about emotional hygiene earlier. Physical hygiene, yes. But now schools are talking about emotion. They're talking about, a lot of schools have a Mind Matters period. So, Bombay Scottish School, which is in Powai, they had this whole program across grades from grade 1 to grade 10, age appropriate content about, what is emotion? What do you mean by happiness? What do you mean by anger? What do you do when you handle it? So it will be different for a first grader as compared to a 10th grader, but the theme would be the same. So a lot of schools do that. They have programs where they are, talking about emotions, talking about how do you learn to regulate. Most schools now, it's mandatory to have a counselor in schools. So schools have counselors, and it's very easy for the children to just walk into the counselor's room and talk about it. And it's normalized now to go and talk to a counselor. The stigma is going away gradually. So schools are doing their bit, but schools are overworked, right? You have 45 kids in a class, you have 35 kids in a class, one counselor for an entire school. So as a parent body, we also need to do a lot. Parents need to really focus on not about, their Intel IQ or about academics and marks, but about developing emotional quotient in the children. Teaching children how to handle emotions. It's a job that parents must do.
And in reproductive years, so birth control pills and the other things that we take, hormonal pills that we take, how does that impact the mental health?
So, you use birth controls for different reasons. One is, of course, for handling, family planning. But sometimes you're also given birth control pills because you have a very bad menstrual history. So you're bleeding a lot and your gynecologist wants, to control that and have a more controlled bleeding, or you have a lot of pain during your bleeding. So oral contraceptive pills are given for different reasons. Now, depending on what kind of oral contraceptive pill, it can impact your mental health. So oral contraceptive pills are usually made up of two chemicals. One is estrogen and progesterone. Now, estrogen as a hormone is neuroprotective. It's good for the brain. But progesterone is not. So oral contraceptive pills that have higher value of progesterone causes a lot of emotional changes. So it can cause a lot of anxiety, irritability, and manifest with depression. So how do we recognize that? If suppose somebody never had any of these symptoms before, and the moment you started the oral contraceptive pills, within a month or two, you've noticed that there is a change. So then we know there is a connection between this pill that you have taken and your mental health. So okay, do we stop the oral contraceptives? Sometimes oral contraceptives are needed, not just for family planning, but for other menstrual related issues. So then you change the type of oral contraceptive pill, which is more estrogen related, less of progesterone. So then you're able to take care of the complications and mental health that can happen with oral contraceptive pills. So awareness that this can happen is important. So आपको लग रहा है कि मैंने ये पिल शुरू किया और मेरी मूड चेंज हो गई है, don't let anybody tell you कि नहीं तुम्हारे मन की बात है, होता है. So you can go back to your doctor and tell them कि I am noticing a change in my mood.
Okay. And in terms of now coming to a stage further, which is perimenopause and menopause, this is one thing I think not a lot of discussion has happened on this topic, but what exactly happened during those phases when you're going through perimenopause and menopause?
So perimenopause, again, when let's look at what's happening to the hormones, right? So your hormones are declining. Your estrogen is getting lesser and lesser. Like I told you, estrogen is a neuroprotective chemical. So it's almost works like a natural antidepressant. Now, when you're in the perimenopause period, it's declining. When you're in menopause, estrogen band ho gaya. So then there is no neuroprotection naturally that's happening. If you compare to earlier times, our mothers or our grandmothers, at that time their responsibilities had become lesser because their kids have got married. Because maybe my grandmother got married when she was probably 14. So by the time she reached perimenopause, she already had grandchildren. So her responsibilities were lesser. Now what is happening when you are in a perimenopause period? You're having kids who are in the 10th standard. You have a kid who is 6-year-old and 7-year-old. And you also have parents whom you're taking care of. So the perimenopausal period, we call them the sandwich generation. You're sandwiched between caregiving of young kids and caregiving of the elderly population at your home. So your responsibilities are more. You're also at the peak of your career at that time. You build up your career from that younger age, and you're 40 to 50, you are doing well at your jobs. You're at higher positions with more responsibility. So that also adds on to your burden which is around. So it's so much of burden and no protection from the brain. So that is why you experience perimenopausal changes. And see, when you have your periods regularly and you know, okay, I'm going to get my period, I know why, because I'm a little irritable. Now, when the periods are becoming irregular, this irritability is happening at random times. So it's not a regular irritability. So women talk about increased irritability, crying very, very often, brain fog, unable to connect the dots, memory issues, forgetting things which they were forgetting before, missing deadlines, sleep issues, of course, the physical changes of bloating, hot flushes, and all these can start about 5 to 6 years before actual menopause comes in. So 5 to 6 years you're going through this till you reach menopause. So then, and menopause, then the joint pains, the physical difficulties, headaches, a lot of migraines women in the perimenopausal age group experience.
And also, I think a lot of relationships around them are changing as well.
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, because they're going through these hormonal changes, their relationship with their partner is changing. The physical intimacy is changing, right? And as a perimenopausal woman, like I told you, you are having so many other responsibilities. So sometimes your relationship with your spouse or your partner becomes secondary then. Ideally, it should not. So that becomes, and that causes strain in intimate partner relationships, because how much can a woman do? How many responsibilities one person can take care of? So certain things she keeps it on the back burner. The worst thing that a woman in the perimenopausal age group does is keep herself in the back burner. So that's the last person that you're going to take care of. You never take care of yourself. You will take care of, children always will come first, then your parents, your spouse, your work, and then there is no time for yourself. So your relationship with yourself also changes.
And what would be your suggestion to women who are in their perimenopausal phase or menopausal phase?
So one is, like I said, physical health. You have to take care of your physical. Maybe you were in the prime, you were doing some physical activity earlier and you've kind of stopped because you're so, bogged down with so many responsibilities. You have to make time for physical health and not just walking. A lot of times women say, I walk every day for half an hour. No, that's not enough. In the perimenopause age group, you have to include some kind of resistance training and strength training, because you need to build those muscles for mobility. And when you become, and like we talk about when they move into how adolescent mental health impacted your reproductive age group, same thing, your perimenopausal health is going to impact how you're going to be when you're a senior citizen. So mobility issues with mobility cause a lot of mental health issues when you're older. So taking care of your physical health, making sure you're sleeping on time. And again, this is the age group where you've put your kids off to sleep, you've been so busy throughout. So that's the only time when everybody's gone to bed that you're scrolling your phone and you're sleeping later, but you're still getting up at 6 o'clock because you have to get up and do your work. So that doomsday scrolling that we call. So we have to kind of keep our gadgets away and sleep on time and wake up on time. Taking care of nutrition, so including a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin E, taking care of your vitamin D. So these are physical aspects. Mental health aspects, taking out time every day for yourself. Half an hour, if you don't get at least 15 minutes a day in some kind of self-care activity. It could be one hobby. It could be listening to your favorite Spotify list. It could be journaling. It could be meditation. It could be going for that, walk or stroll. But 15 minutes to 30 minutes a day, you have to take out for yourself. And you talk to as many women as you want and they'll say, we don't have the time for it. Like we have time 24 hours. It sounds, so surprising that, you and I included, find it so difficult to find 15 minutes for ourselves. So, that should be a non-negotiable, that this is my self-care time where I'm going to kind of, take time to build myself up. And if that means getting up half an hour early before everybody else and doing that, it's important that you do it.
So you're saying it's not like 40s is the new 30s, which we keep saying. And, because everyone keeps saying 40s is the new 30s, 50s is the new 30s. But your body is not like that, right? Your body is changing.
Absolutely. See, what happens, your body is changing. Your 40 and 30, your hormonal axis is not going to follow that. Why is for? Because now, because of lifestyle changes, we're living longer, which is great. But are we living healthier? Is the question. So, and we only live healthier if you're able to take care of these parameters. So then your 60 will be your 40, because then you're active mentally, you're active physically, even if you have achieved perimenopause, even if you achieve menopause, because that's going to take its own time. We are starting puberty quite early. So you're going to reach menopause also early. See, menopause is when your ovaries stop functioning. So if they have started functioning early, young girls, 10-year-olds are getting menarche and puberty. That means you're also going to finish off earlier. So that's going to follow its cycle. So if you are not going to take care of it and say, oh, 40s and new 30s, are you physically and mentally prepared to be that way with all these hormonal changes happening?
And now talking about the next phase, which is more of older adulthood and old age. So how does a woman's body and mind behaves in this particular stage of life?
So after you've achieved menopause, and the changes that happen after that is, again, the mobility issues in elderly women. So they find difficult, so they're very scared. So a lot of anxiety we see in geriatric population, because they're scared that they will fall, so they don't step out as much. A lot of elderly, what do we see is because partners have passed away, right? Husband and wife have been staying together. Suddenly one of the husband's passed away, and now you're a widow and you're alone. You have been the matriarch at home, managing everything was in your control. You were deciding everything for the home, and suddenly all responsibilities you've handed over because you don't want to do it anymore. But that means it's a big vacuum in your life. You don't know what to do with your time. And if you've not filled your time with things to do, then you're going to struggle. So with mobility, then you socially isolate yourself. You've not had your friend group. You've not developed hobbies earlier. You don't know what to do with your time. Then you're not using your brain function. So cognitive decline is what we see when women post-menopause, because they're not using their brain functions. They're not doing activities for brain. Okay, chalo, I'm exercising every day. I'm doing strength training, but I've not done any exercise for my brain. Then that's going to fail. So you're living longer. Physically, you're fine, but your brain is aging much faster. And we see a lot of dementia changes in women now. Earlier, we would see them at, let's say, at 80. We're seeing dementia changes at 65 and 70. So the brain is shrinking faster. Physically, you're great, but your mental faculties are failing. So it's very important to be aware. We talk about disadvantages in women. Today, we had a women psychiatric conference, and there was this talk about, triple A. So, old age, women, and widow. They are the ones who are the most vulnerable population for mental health issues. Depression is very common in elderly, and that is ignored because you say, आपको क्या जरूरत है डिप्रेशन, आपको क्या प्रॉब्लम है, डिप्रेशन का क्या, अभी तो सब कुछ हो गया है, अब क्यों डिप्रेशन हो रहा है? बिकॉज वी आर एसोसिएटिंग डिप्रेशन की कुछ प्रॉब्लम होगा लाइफ में, कोई स्ट्रेस है तो मुझे आपको डिप्रेशन हो सकता है. अभी क्या डिप्रेशन, आप सबको तो सेटल हो गया है, बच्चे आपके अच्छे से कर रहे हैं, आपको फाइनेंस की कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, आप हेल्दी हो, आपको क्या डिप्रेशन? सो इट गेट्स मिस्ड. डिमेंशिया गेट्स मिस्ड अ लॉट बिकॉज वी नॉर्मलाइज फॉरगेटफुलनेस कि ओल्ड एज है तो भूलना तो नॉर्मल है. नहीं, नॉर्मल नहीं है भूलना. So we have to get that evaluated. So these are the changes that happen with old age and mental health.
And during this phase, what can someone do to make sure that their brain, their mind is also active? It's not, it's also aging slower as their body is.
So a lot of cognitive exercises, like you are going to do exercises for your physical body. In the same way, a lot of cognitive exercises can be as simple as playing game of cards. It can be as simple as playing Uno every day, right? Again, learning new technology. So when your senior citizens, I have senior citizens who play bridge online, or they're playing chess with the computer. So using technology a little bit to their advantage and interacting with that. There are a lot of apps, app known as Cognifid, Lumosity, where there are exercises for the brain. So depending on the level, you keep on increasing. Solving puzzles, Sudoku, crossword puzzles, painting, writing. We advise a lot of senior citizens to write using both their right and left hand. So all the senior citizens who come to me always tell them, keep a book. It could be copying something from the newspaper. You use right hand to write on one page and left hand से दूसरे. But नहीं, because they're so used to having beautiful handwriting. So ये handwriting बहुत खराब आ गया. मैंने कहा हम handwriting के लिए नहीं कर रहे, ताकि आपकी दोनों sides of the brain active होगा. So you do those activities. So these are the cognitive exercises that you can do. Socialization is a very good exercise for the brain. So you join senior citizen group, you go for that laughing club, you join the your shloka class or your satsang group or your Bhagavad Gita class or your church group or your mohalla wala group where everybody is praying together. Some activity where you're going and you're joining and you're interacting so with other people. Volunteering. A lot of senior citizens, when I'm saying senior citizen, we're calling 60 plus a senior citizen. Volunteering at organizations, mentoring young people. So, you at organizations, you connect the senior citizens with the youth. So they teach them some skills. Learning new languages. I see a lot of good senior citizens because, and thankfully, thanks to COVID, we've got exposed to Zoom and so many platforms where online learning. I can stay at home and learn so many things. So encourage them to get onto those platforms to learn things that they like, hobby, knitting, crochet. All these are exercises that they can do.
So it's like they need to keep themselves engaged in some activity or the other of their liking.
Absolutely. Because what happens many times, if women are working also, right? And you worked so hard, and the moment you take that retirement farewell party हो गया, and like मैं कल से कुछ नहीं करूँगी, मैंने इतने साल इतना काम किया है, right? And that's okay. आप कुछ मत करना work related, but don't sit idle without using your brain. So you start engaging in those kind of activities. So have things to fill your day with. Don't just mindlessly consume content. Most of the favorite pastime of senior citizens and is WhatsApp. They're either passing some information or sending good morning to everybody, broadcast good morning, and a lot of negative information that they're not able to process because they're picking up information from YouTube, from WhatsApp universities, and then they're just talking about that. So getting off their phones, I think young adolescents and senior citizens, both we are seeing screen overuse. So getting off the screens, engaging in communities is very important.
Through these different stages of a woman's life, in your experience, which treatments and therapies you have seen working more with women?
So one is, I said before we talk about any treatment, we have to be aware, and I think platforms like this create the awareness that we as women are more vulnerable to mental health disorders than any other population. Women and also people from the LGBTQ community because of the stress that they undergo. So we are very vulnerable. So that's one thing that you can be aware that you're vulnerable. So seek help. Pharmacotherapy, don't hesitate to take medications if needed. A lot of stigma associated with medications. And that is a myth that I really want to break, that medications are really beneficial when given at the right dose for the right indication. They will change the way your life is. So we need not fight the whole battle. I don't want to. And why people feel medications is, one is, I don't want to get dependent on it. Will I get dependent on it? No, you will not get dependent on it because it is a need. Like, you're not going to get dependent on the spectacles that you're going to use. It just improves your vision. In the same way, when you use medications, if and when indicated, I'm not saying everybody needs medications. If medications are given, don't hesitate to take it. It really will improve the quality of your life. You're not going to get dependent on it. Medications are also tailor-made for women because when you meet a professional going to start your medications, going to take care of the medications that are right for you depending on your hormonal axis. Women are concerned about medications because they're concerned about weight gain. Or will the medication make me fat? So if you're struggling with that, if you're struggling to lose weight, then your doctor will give you medications which will not cause you weight gain. So be open to taking medications is, I think, one of the fundamental things that I would want to stress on. The second thing is women, which is a little more different than men, is more trauma-informed therapy. because women undergo a lot of traumatic experiences in their life, right, from adolescent to the reproductive age group. It could be sexual abuse, it could be molestation, it could be physical abuse at home, it could be the patriarchal system, it could be the discrimination. So, a lot of trauma, and the way the trauma is kind of shaping their brain. So, a trauma informed therapist is want to work on that trauma, which is very different for women. Different kinds of therapies. Women do very well in something we call as dialectical behavior therapy. So, finding a therapist who will do that for you, or cognitive behavior therapy, where you change. Cognition means the way you're thinking. So, to be able to change that process. So, women do very well in therapy when they find the right fit of the therapist, because it's about changing the way your brain has been thinking. But it should always happen under supervision with a good therapist, and if needed with medication. So these are the things I think that women should focus on, that don't hesitate to take medications. It will change your life. And in the same way, be ready to kind of indulge in therapy and be ready for that change. Because I think of women's mental health, how we say ki beti padhao and desh badhao, in the same way, a women's mental health will change the health of the entire family. So if a mother is battling with mental health, then she's a difficult parent to be. So then the home environment is very, very stressful. And usually, by default, the mother is the most important caregiver at home. And of course, the roles are changing. Fathers are also equally involved. But usually it's the mother who's the core, right? And if the mother is not doing well and struggling with parenting, the children are going to struggle. The children's stress is increasing, mental health adolescent, and then we're just continuing the vicious cycle, right? Even in the reproductive age group, an irritable, angry mother is not going to help the situation. So a woman's mental health will change. Improving a woman's mental health will change everything around. I think change society. And I think that's why I think when very, very, heartening to see that when we were talking about the new health policy, when, about women and children, when our PM Modi announced on his birthday, there was psychiatric screening which was there in that document, along with all other screenings, which is such a forward thing to do, right? It's amazing that we are looking at now the mental health of the woman and the mother.
Yeah, that's correct. And what, even today, coming to a professional, seeking help, it is a stigma, right? Not a lot of women, they are open to the idea. So how can we break the stigma? How can we make them more comfortable to really come to professionals and open up with their issues and, be better, have a better quality of life?
So one is understanding that when you're struggling with your mood, thinking or behavior, it has nothing to do with your mind. I think we should just break that concept. Mind is a very spiritual and a philosophical concept. Everything is in the brain. So the moment you normalize it, कि अगर आपको चेस्ट पेन हो रहा है तो आप कार्डियोलॉजिस्ट के पास जाओगे, आपको पेट में दर्द हो रहा है आप गैस्ट्रोएंटरोलॉजिस्ट के पास जाओगे. इन द सेम वे अगर आपको मूड में चेंजेस है, मतलब आपके ब्रेन के सर्किट्स में कोई ना कोई प्रॉब्लम चल रही है. सो ब्रेन इज अ मशीन, इट हैज़ अ फिजिकल, केमिकल एंड एन इलेक्ट्रिकल पार्ट. और उसमें कोई भी प्रॉब्लम हो रही है तो इट इज़ मैनिफेस्टिंग एज दिस. सो it is not something that you can control. So the moment we realize that this is not something that I can control, people will seek help for mental health. That is a stigma, right? कि आप अपना बिहेवियर को चेंज कर सकते हो, आप योगा कर लो, अच्छा सोचो, क्यों इतना नेगेटिव सोच रहे हो, सोच को बदलो. कैसे बदलेंगे? नहीं बदल सकते, बिकॉज वो सर्किट ही ठीक नहीं है. उसको सर्किट को ठीक करेंगे तो सोच बदलेगा. सो लुक एट इट एज इट्स अ ब्रेन हेल्थ. सो दैट्स वन थिंग. Second thing is, a lot of times, I think working women tend to seek help more than women who are homemakers. Because when working women struggle with mental health, it's impacting 2-3 things, right? They're impacting their work as well as home. But when it's only a homemaker who's struggling because she's not the primary bread earner of the family, everybody ignores her health. So especially focusing on homemakers who struggle with mental health, because they're at home by themselves. In that period, children have gone to school, husbands are working, and they are going through this depression, anxiety, and nobody is focusing on them. So as a homemaker, if we are struggling with that, no, we should kind of say that there is no stigma associated with, because again they'll say कि आपको तो कोई problem ही नहीं, तुम्हारी life तो कितनी set है, why are you talking about depression, anxiety? No, this is because my brain is changing and I need help. A lot of times women's symptoms are trivialized. ये तो psychological है. Like you said that everybody will say mood swings होते हैं, ये तुम्हारी वो, is it that time of the month for you?
Correct.
So changing that narrative, that's saying that, you know, yes, we are going through that time of the month and that time of the month is impacting my brain, so we need to take help. So the more we talk about it, we normalize it, and I think women can only do that. Sometimes we are the biggest enemies to each other. So if we as mothers, we as mother-in-laws, we as bosses will tell you it's okay, you know, you take that leave on your period day, it's okay, you go and take that help, automatically everything around us will change.
True, and that's very interesting because, yeah, I mean, everyone just puts it on mood swings and, you know, that time of the month. And even with, you know, in corporates, it's a thing that if it's a, you know, women in 40s, 50s, it's more like menopause aaya hai. That's why she's behaving like that. But yeah, I think this is something which should be taken as a sign, and, you know, the mental health needs to be prioritized.
Correct. So you have to be supportive around that period that yes, she is going through menopause or she's going through perimenopause. So you have to give her that support around at the workplace. You have to be a community that's going to rally, because she's given you so many years of her life building up your company. And she's not asking for any favors, right? It's just that support, being more inclusive. These microaggressions at workplace need to go away.
Correct. And also, you know, in corporates, there was once I read this thing and it resonated really well, that women, they typically, you know, leave workforce at 3 points. One is, you know, when they are getting married. Second is when they are having a baby during maternity, and third is menopause. And, you know, a lot of women, they actually leave during these times. So we see, you know, in terms of education, women getting educated, we see them in schools and colleges going for higher education, joining offices as well. But yes, during these 3 phases, we see a lot of them just moving out of the system. And, you know, in your opinion, what can be done better for women so that they stay in the system and the burden that happens during these 3 phases, it's reduced for them?
See, this burden happens because women are completely unsupported during this period, right? During marriage. And I'll give you an example of a young girl who came to me last week, studied, excellent student, throughout her life, aced, did her MBA from a grey, and I'm just narrating the story for us to understand. These are one of the thousands of stories, right? Did an MBA from a B school, went through the arranged marriage setup, and when she was studying, she never learned any of the household chores, just like her brother did not, right? And she thought कि सीख लेंगे, कर लेंगे, you know. अगर मैंने B school IIM से किया है तो मैं दाल तो बना ही ले सकती हूँ, right? And when she got married and she went, the expectations from her were very different from the expectations from her spouse, because she was getting into a home with parents, and she said, no, you have to work and you have to manage the home equally, right? Which is unfair, because she's putting in 12 hours at a job which is extremely stressful for her. She is having high demand, and then coming back home and she has to decide, you know, what to cook. Because you're the new daughter-in-law in the house, you can't outsource the work, even if you can afford to. She can say, I afford, I'll pay for a maid. But no, how can you, we can't cook food made by a maid. They're used to cooking food made by the woman in the house. So the struggle, so then that's why women say, we can't manage this. So what do I choose? Do I choose my career, or do I choose
the relationship?
And that's why a lot of young girls are not getting married now. Because I think I don't want to put in that work for somebody I've just met now. I'm enjoying my work and I don't want to sacrifice it. That's why we see, a lot of parents coming and telling, counsel them to get married. But are we changing the narrative at homes? So this young girl was struggling, because every time she would come home, she's battling with this whole thing of managing. She has to manage the home. She has to manage, all those things. So then she's debating whether should I leave my job and do this. And imagine such an educated girl leaving her home to just manage what's happening at home. She would not be happy. She would have anxiety, would have depression. A lot of times, women can choose to do that out of their free will. If it's done out of free will, it doesn't cause stress, right? This is a forced decision because of how you're expecting a woman to be.
Correct.
So that's why I think during that time, even during when childbearing age, right, or when they have babies, of course, the breastfeeding is the only thing that a woman, absolutely needs to do that can't be outsourced. But other than that, there are so many things that can be outsourced to, it's not about affordability or social. I'm not talking about affording help, but even the spouse or family at home, pitching in and saying that I'll take care of the baby, you manage work. I'll go for this parent-teacher meeting. You attend that meeting that you want. It'll be the woman who will take the leave if the child is sick. Very rarely we'll see fathers who take a leave and take the child to the hospital when the mother has an important meeting. So because the primary caregiver is the woman, she's burdened, and then she chooses the family over other things, because if she doesn't do that, then society will tell her that, what a bad mother she is, or those labels will start coming, right? So those kind of narrative she doesn't want. So she prefers to kind of, do that. So, and menopause. With menopause, what happens is, again, you have a brain fog, you're cognitively declining, and sometimes you're just fed up. You've done it, you're exhausted, and you're like, now I don't want to do anything, I just want to take a break. So that's why of those 3 periods you find women falling out of the workplace. So if the families can be supportive, if we as a community support each other, I think we won't see those breaks happening.
And have you, in your practice, have you encountered any misconceptions around women's mental health, during various stages of their lives?
Always. Like I said, women's mental health is always neglected. So it's, on a daily basis, I would kind of tell you stories, right? It also happens, sometimes the other way around. I'll give you another example. Sometimes a woman who is complaining of a headache or a physical problem and visits a doctor, sometimes a woman is not taken seriously because they think, oh, this is functional, or this is because she's stressed, this is a psychological headache. And missing a lot of actual physical ailments also because you're a woman. Compared to if you're a male counterpart who goes with headache, it's taken very, very seriously. Because they think, oh, you're just, woman is psychologically weak, she's stressed, that's why she's having a headache. I'll give you an example. There was this young woman who was referred by a doctor colleague saying that, I've done all her tests, but she's not getting better. She's complaining of constantly feeling tired, or lack of drive. She has no motivation to do anything. And family's putting a lot of pressure. She has to get married. Maybe she's stressed because of that. Why don't you kind of evaluate? I said, okay. So she came, and because she's come from the physician, we don't do too many tests. Talked to her, and she was very, very down, lethargic. But no triggers or anything. Gave medications for some time, but not getting better with the medications. Usually if it's depression, anxiety, she will get better. Not getting better, and just, okay, let's repeat her blood test. And when you repeated the blood test, you found that her iron levels were very, very low. And that got completely missed. And the moment we gave her the iron supplements, her energy was back. She was back to being normal. She didn't need any of the psychiatric medications. So women's health in general is ignored. A lot of times people assume it's psychological. So we have to be standing our ground when you're having a problem. Be very firm, do your research, and go to your doctor equipped to tell, these are what I'm feeling, can you look into it?
And I'll ask my last question now. What would be some self-care techniques or habits that a woman should build so that she has good mental health and physical health overall?
So I think for developing, good mental health is understanding that being aware of your emotions, being tuned with what are the changes that happen in your body when you're angry, when you're sad, when you're jealous, when you're extremely worked up about something. There will be some physical cue. It can be that stomach pain, it can be that headache that's happening constantly. So understanding your emotions and being aware about it is one way. The second thing is developing good techniques to manage stress. So your self-care routine, like journaling. We talk about gratitude journal a lot. It's all religions talk about gratitude, right? Thank you for everything that we say. But we're talking about gratitude as a practice, not saying, okay, thank you for my house, thank you for my spouse, not like that. Some positive experience in the day. If I have to ask you, how was your day yesterday? You will tell me, oh, you know what, I missed my bus, the train was crowded, my boss was bad. And I'll tell you, okay, can you tell me one good thing of the day? And you'll actually have to pause and think, कि क्या अच्छा हुआ था पूरे दिन में? All of us. Because we are never, our brain's not trained to look at the positive. Our brain is always trained to solve problems. So we are constantly looking at what's the problem in my environment that I can fix. So when you have that practice of, okay, at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, 2 positive experiences of the day, you're actually training that part of your brain. This is research, right? Having some mindfulness activity, it could be a breathing exercise, it could be brushing your teeth with mindfulness, it could be practicing yoga, anything, something that you're there in the present moment. Any kind of movement, women must exercise and take that time out for themselves. It's extremely important for their brain health. Socialization. You have to have your girl gang, your group of friends where you're going out. It could be for a cup of coffee, it could be maybe connecting online with your friends once in a month. That's extremely good for your brain health. Volunteering is very good for the brain health. Any kind of volunteering activity will improve your brain health. So these are some of the things that you can do.
That's very interesting, and thank you so much, doctor. I mean, I've learned so much about my own self, I would say, throughout, all these stages, and how, the body is working, how the brain is working during these phases of life, and, how we respond to it. And I'm sure, our audience would have learned a lot as well. Thank you so much,
It was
doctor.
my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you.